Hi, Lindsey. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Super good. I'm so happy that we're here. We found the time between the two of our schedules to be able to chat tonight. I wanted to introduce everybody to Lindsey Griffin. If you don't already know who she is, I've been watching you on the internet. No, not really. I'm not much of a lurker, but you definitely come across my timeline quite often. Um, I I have noticed how bold you are, how self-assured you are. I love that you are so authentic and raw, and you post from the heart. And I've also noticed more recently. So I think I would have only kind of started seeing your posts and your husband, Sean Griffin's ministry, Kingdom in Context. For those who don't know it, now you'll know it and you'll be happy that you went to check it out. Probably just before your son was born, but actually maybe not even. I'm not sure. I might have come on this path even after if he's not even 2 years. Yeah, I don't think. But all that to say is that I feel a softness to a lot of your posts now. I feel and you can definitely we're going to go through your testimony today so you can definitely see if I picked up on this or if you even noticed it in yourself of becoming a mom, like a softness that comes and like I feel like you're trying to bring people back to Jesus. Like there's this whole wild and wacky Torah world out there and you guys are responsible for uh, fostering and teaching a lot of the people who are out there because I mean you can tell us in a moment how big the ministry is. I'm not even sure how many tens of thousands of people follow you guys on various channels. Anyway, I'm loving and appreciating a softness in your posts these days because it's so badly needed. I'm just new on this Torah scene, and as I was saying a moment ago, sometimes I just want to run away while I'm ahead because it's so brutal. So anyway, I just super glad to be talking to you, and I want to hear Lindsey Griffin, the real human behind these, you know, snarky, you're funny and sarcastic sometimes, and I want to know the real human behind Lindsey and your path, especially when it comes to your walk in the faith and everything that you've gone through over the last year. So thank you very, very much for being here.
Well, thanks for inviting me. I really appreciate it. And as I was telling you before we started recording, it has been a very long time since I've shared my testimony. So I'm sure the Lord will bring things back to my remembrance. But yeah, if I'm hoping that I can be edifying to anyone listening. Hoping I'll have the words that people need to hear.
So could you get us started with kind of yeah, I mean just filling in the gaps of what I don't know or what I missed in terms of where you guys are at as a ministry, some information about Kingdom and Context, because that's where you're at now in 2024, but I mean that obviously wasn't always the case. I don't even know where you were on your walk when you met Sean. We had an exchange the other day, something about being a terrorist for only 6 months before you met him. So I think you were already on this path. So
Mhm.
yeah, just start us off with where you guys are kind of right now. I see your son in the background there in the picture, who I think you said is 19 months. And
Yeah, that's Levi. Um, so Sean and I have been together for around 8 years, married for 7. And yeah, Kingdom in Context is, I would say it's my husband's ministry. He's the teacher. He's the one that I feel has the gifting and the authority, and definitely the understanding and knowledge to teach. But I am part of the ministry, obviously. I think we've got like 149,000 subs on YouTube. I'm not sure. I haven't checked in a while. Which yeah, that's great. You know, it's wonderful. I don't know how many of those 149,000 actually watch the content. I mean, if you know how YouTube is, you know, that sub count doesn't necessarily mean a whole lot in terms of who's actually getting notified that you've got videos. So yeah, we started the ministry about 7 years ago, a little after we got married. We were just doing a lot of debating with people on Facebook, and we were in some groups that were started based on something that Rob Skiba was doing. Do you know who Rob Skiba was?
yeah,
Um,
I learned about
based,
him. not that long ago. And when I did, I was like, I can't believe I never heard this guy. It's brilliant.
Yeah, honestly, sometimes I still can't believe that he has passed away. It seems so surreal, but he had a virtual house church show that he would do on Shabbat. And so a Facebook group was started for it. And of course, all kinds of Torah people are, hanging out in that Facebook group. And I had first noticed Sean in there, some of the posts he was making. And I was really attracted to his knowledge of scripture. And yeah, once we got together, he moved out to Colorado from Oklahoma. And it was probably within about 8 to 9 months that he started the channel, because he was always typing out these super long comments explaining things to people. And I'd be like, if you just would, me in my naive days would be like, if you would just make a video, then you could link that and people will watch it and they'll hear your explanation. You won't have to type these long comments anymore. Little did I know, very few people will go just watch the video. And even if they do, a lot of people have decided they disagree with you before they even hear you out. So they're just in there to disagree in your comments and all that. But that was how we came up with the idea to start the ministry. And over time, it's just grown to a point of support where I was able to become a stay-at-home wife, now mother. And Sean does this full time, plus some other things that he does. Like he's got the tea company, he's selling tea. He's been working on a contextual study guide of scripture. And he actually has the standalone book of Enoch study guide separated by itself. So he sells that on Amazon. So there's other things that he does besides just this. But most of it's related to Kingdom Context, the Bible, teaching. Right now he's been doing a class on his Patreon for people if they want more specialized type teaching. So yeah, he's been really busy with that. And I've become a mom. I'm in my toddler days right now and growing into that role. So yeah, that's
Wow,
where we're at with the ministry.
perfect. Thank you. So you said that Levi's 19 months?
Yeah, almost 20 months old.
Right. So when you guys first got together, you noticed him. I know that feeling of noticing a guy online and seeing how smart slash nerdy they are. I don't know if Sean is, yeah, Sean's obviously
Oh
a
yes.
Bible. And then like, yeah, I think and I've told this story a few times on in videos that is a very similar story to how Jesse and I met, and it was in your group, Kingdom in Context, or Kingdom Crew.
Kingdom Crew.
So I'll be forever grateful. I love telling that story, and I still have in the back of my head, you guys should have some kind of dating. It's such a weird niche thing, and of course, it's your life, like my timeline was so strange and quick, and things just unraveled to me very quickly. Just kind of before I met Jesse, I was dabbling in this, but I was still going to church. Like I kind of could have ended up in a different direction with a different kind of man who also knew about scripture from a different point of view. I guess just to
Yeah.
say it is such a niche thing, but then when it is your life, like of course all of Sean's work is surrounding this because there's nothing else when it's your life. You can't be a part-time. You can't do any of it part-time. It takes everything over. It's how you live your life. It's not just going to a building one day, once a week and listening
Right.
to somebody talk and coming back home. So um, yeah, so where were you? Were you raised? I think you were not actually raised Christian. I don't know where you were raised. I'd be curious to know like a little bit about your upbringing, where you were and how that led you, I guess, similar to me to the New Age. However
Yeah,
many
so
you're going to fill in there, I'll let you run with it.
yeah, I can start in the beginning. So my dad came from a very devout Christian family, and he was someone who always was blessed with the gift of faith. Honestly, he didn't go through a time in his life where he didn't believe in God and Jesus. So it just for him was just a self-evident truth. My mother came from not a Christian background. She came from a kind of Catholic background. I would say that my grandmother on my mom's side is kind of a just in case Catholic. Like she doesn't go to mass, she doesn't do communion. She's I would say the last 50 years of her life, her religion has really been the Democratic Party, as weird as that might sound, but politics can become a religion for some people. But she's going to have a Catholic funeral and have her last rites done. So she's, make sure she gets in. So that's kind of the background that my mom came from. And my grandfather on that side, I would call him a just in case Christian too, but he was the type that maybe would get baptized once in a while just in case he died. Otherwise, he was not a great person. So my mom came from this real abusive, broken background. And so her spirituality was a weird mix of things where she had a dream about Jesus when she was 16. And ever since then, I think that kind of gave her this idea that she knew him and she had a relationship with him. And it didn't matter how she lived her life or if the Bible was true, or she kind of had this weird mix of things where she was into psychic stuff. Like she watched a lot of that John Edwards guy crossing over. Super intense.
I totally forgot about that until exactly. Oh my goodness.
And Sylvia Brown. Don't get me started on Montel Williams and Sylvia Brown. I mean, oh my gosh, because she thought that she had psychic abilities and she felt persecuted for her whole life, and that, the Christians are evil because they think I don't have this gift. And, so she was kind of, I would say that she wore the spiritual pants in the relationship with my dad. So my dad would have these moments where he would want to teach us Christianity, but he didn't know how to gently guide us and train us up in the way we should go. So he was kind of more like, you go to church and you believe because I tell you to believe. It's not this gentle guidance into, and understanding that I have to have my own experience with this. I have to have my own relationship. I have to have my own gift of faith and belief. You can't just force me to believe. So that was kind of the mixture of spirituality and religion that I had in my life. It was the Christianity was very sporadic. My dad, in the first part of their marriage, for a few years, my dad was trying to take us to church as a family, but my dad's family went through some real niche phases themselves through the 90s. And so they were like starting their own church in different places, and then they would have doctrinal problems, and then they'd split off to start a different church. And a lot of it, my grandpa, bless his heart, he went through a lot of different phases. I mean, he went through a Pentecostal hellfire and brimstone phase for a while, and that was the time we were going to his church. And so us kids kind of got scared. We would go to church and our grandfather would be up, screaming at the pulpit, about hell and fire and brimstone. And my mom had brought us coloring books to like lay under the pews and color while church service is going on. And and I was baptized for the first time in that church when I was like 7 years old. And I don't remember asking to be baptized. I don't remember why I was baptized. But I remember it feeling scary. Like they put me in jeans, commando. And that was the first time I had ever been commando. And it like felt strange as a child. I was like uncomfortable. And then I was like taken to this tub in front of the congregation. My papa like dumped me into the water, and I popped up and people clapped. And like, I just have these real hazy memories of that feeling weird and scary and uncomfortable. And I didn't understand it. So that was kind of how my family was on both sides. So my dad's side was super Christian, and I ended up kind of being alienated by my mom from that side of the family, where I look back now and I wish that hadn't happened, because I feel like it would have been good for me to have. I look back now and I know they were really good-hearted Christians, and they loved the Lord, and they were good Christ-like people. And I feel like if I had had more influence from Christians like that in my life, my idea of Christianity and the Bible probably wouldn't have been so warped and so bitter and angry, because my mom had a lot of bitterness and anger towards specifically Christianity and the Bible. She didn't feel that way about other religions.
People don't though, right? That's the one. That's the one. I
Yeah.
was talking to a friend the other day, one of my only non-believing friends. I don't have very many friends left in real life, but he's somebody
Mhm.
who stuck with me this whole, all of these crazy transitions I've been through in the last few years. And he said to me the other day, he said, I've checked out. I mean, he was a yoga teacher. He read the Quran. He looked in all of these. He said, the Bible is really the only thing I haven't read. And I said, well, that's on purpose. That's because you
Yeah.
grew up in a place that told you that it was evil because the church did X, Y, and Z. That's how it works.
Yep.
Check out
Yeah.
everything except for the Bible.
Yeah. I can remember times when I was a kid where I would try to say prayers to God in my bed at night, but I just didn't feel that connection. I remember one time I asked God to show me a sign that he was real and play, and that sign was that my favorite song would be playing on the radio. And I turned the radio on, and it was my favorite song was playing, but it was Aerosmith at the time of what movie did they do that song for?
Armageddon.
Oh, that yes, the song for Armageddon. So that was on like every third song on the radio at that time. But here I am, like 9 or 10 years old or something, like, oh, but that was like that was all that I was really I didn't have anyone guiding me on how to pray or telling me, you don't have to ask God to approve in that way too, like there's other ways we can handle this, honey. I didn't have anyone giving me that guidance. So I was trying to seek it on my own. And when I was 12 years old, the turning point for me with beliefs was when I was 12 years old. I went to the library and I got a book called Dancing Shadows. And I found out many, many years later that this book was like the person who wrote the book, it was like totally plagiarized. It was a total crock of crap. Like it was a whole bunch of bad misinformation, like the same kind of information that they use for the Zeitgeist documentaries. But I read that book, and it was a book that was basically attacking Christianity and how Christianity stole all these things from paganism, and that Wicca is the true religion. And I just got it in my head that I wanted to be a Wiccan. I wanted to be a witch. And it was a year or two later, my grandma on my mom's side, not my grandma on my dad's side, bought me a book called Teen Witch by Silver Ravenwolf, who is like this huge author in the Wiccan. I don't know if she's popular anymore, but back then she was like the author in the Wiccan crowd. And my parents initially like freaked out, including my mom, and took the book away from me. And then they gave it back. I can't remember why they gave it back. Probably because my mom probably berated my dad about it and told him, we have to let her explore. We have to let her choose. Who knows? But they gave it back to me. And so that was where I really started my journey down in, the path into New Age stuff, Wicca, Eastern religions.
Well, sorry, it's gonna keep happening because I keep getting glimpses of myself at a similar age in a similar way, and I don't often talk about how I was attracted to Wicca, but it was very, do you remember the movie The Craft?
Yes. Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
when that came out, my girlfriends and I thought we were witches, and we tried to do all these, light as a feather, stiff as a board things together, and like the allure of like, and we were all at Catholic school at that time, and the allure of like being able to control and to just have the power to do it on
Yeah.
your own. Whereas when we come to this path, for me, it was like, between witchcraft stuff or manifesting, the secret, what are they? I don't even remember what these terms are
The
anymore.
law of attraction.
Law of attraction, now we don't have to do anything. He's got it.
Yeah. 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 The pressure's off. Yeah. So jumping back into, I guess I'll just move into where I went next. Okay.
Yeah, so
Um,
you were saying that which you kind of you that's what the new age is, right? It's
yeah,
like let's just take all these things from all these places, and witchcraft has nothing to do with yoga, but let's just put them together.
right. Yeah. I used to tell people that I enjoyed a buffet of religions and I just took what I liked from each religion. And I learned that that is actually theosophy, this whole new age thing. It is a newer belief set, and it is a conglomeration of a bunch of different belief sets that does go back to Helena Blavatsky and the Theosophical Society and Alice Bailey and all them. So yes, I got into the new age. I started doing spells at home, and it absolutely had to do with, feeling like I had some kind of control in the world, because I was living in a very chaotic environment. We had lots of foster children. We were already kind of like in poverty, just like on the poverty line ourselves. And then my mom had her issues that, gave her this savior complex. And she was just bringing in all these troubled teens into our house, so there'd be like 11 kids in our house at times. And it was hard to get attention and to feel in control over something. And I was definitely one of those quiet, sad girls at school that either I got picked on or people just didn't really notice me. It was like one or the other. It was never a happy medium, or never like, I was never one of the popular girls. But yeah, I just was kind of invisible. I was that kind of girl. So starting to get into my teenage years, I started with the Wicca stuff, love spells and all that kind of stuff. And I got into some real deep depression issues. And I had a friend who started harming herself. And then that gave me the idea to give it a try. And then that became something that I feel that that's a form of demonic oppression that becomes an addiction for some people. And that was something that I struggled with all the way into my 20s, actually. And then about halfway through high school, I was 15 or 16, my parents decided we were going to pick up and move to Colorado from Ohio. So my whole life was ripped away. Like all the kids I went to elementary school with, the kids I was getting ready to graduate with, I was just moved away from my home, everything I knew. And Colorado was a whole different world. Fort Collins is a very large city compared to where I came from. And so I came from a place where there was like 800 kids in the high school, and that seemed like a lot of kids. And Fort Collins is like got 4 high schools, and there's like 2,500 kids in each school. Nobody even knew I was new, which actually was nice. I guess I can say people didn't realize I was the new kid because nobody really knew each other coming into the high schools. But so I had a big transition in my life at that point. And when we moved out here, I kind of settled in with a group of stoner friends. Stoner intellectuals was the kind that we were, smoke pot and rap freestyles and make art and have, elevated conversations. And
Rapping freestyle, that would be awesome. You have no vintage videotapes of
no, I wasn't the one rapping. I could do poetry. I was a poet, but I could not just flow. In fact, I made a post about my old best friend a while ago. I've talked about her a few times and asked for prayer for her, but she was the one. She had this beautiful gift, actually, of freestyle. But yeah, I mean, we weren't the potheads that like got stoned and just ate pizza and played video games. Like we were, out in the mountains, doing things. So I kind of settled in with a group of friends out here that were also, that no Christians, no one of the faith. So I kind of just continued on my path. I got a little kind of moved away from the Wicca stuff and got more into the Eastern religions stuff, Hinduism, Buddhism, meditation, yoga, all that kind of stuff. I was introduced to the Great Stupa of Dharmakaya, is built up in Red Feather Lakes in Colorado. And it's like a world famous Buddhist temple. And I actually, I had some friends take me up there when I was like 17. And we walked in on this meditation class and they allowed us to join. And it was like this amazing experience of seeing this beautiful building. And the silence in this temple was deafening. And I know that might sound weird to some people. How can something silent be deafening? But once you experience it, you know what I mean? Like you could hear the silence in this place. It was beautiful. And so it kind of just solidified for me, you know, the way that my heart was wanting to go. I felt peace up there. Um, by that time, my parents were divorcing. My dad was very hostile to he and later in my life when I became a teenager is when my dad had this kind of revival of his faith after we moved to Colorado. I feel like he kind of lost his identity a little bit when we moved away because he had lived in that town his whole life, and his family was very well known in that town, so everybody knew my dad. So when we came out to this place where nobody knew him, nobody cared who he wasn't important. I think he had a bit of a crisis, and then me and my older sister and my younger sister kind of all hit our teens almost all at once. And so my poor father has got three teenage girls. We were pretty much out of control in terms of, you know, we had boyfriends that he didn't want us sleeping over with, and, you know, going to parties and things that my mom was letting us do things that he didn't agree with. And so he kind of started having this meltdown, and he and I had started having a lot more fights about religion specifically. And I was coming home from school trying to argue with him about evolution and, you know, whale skeletons found with knee bones, and, you know, just stuff that I know now is like so ridiculous. But my poor dad, he wasn't ready with an answer. He didn't, you know, he didn't go watch Kent Hovind debates and figure out how to, you know, counter this.
Actually, you actually believed what the teachers were saying, or it was just a way that you could dig at him because
Oh no, I was fully indoctrinated in public school. I completely believed in evolution. You know, I never was a full-blown atheist, but I definitely never believed in the God of the Bible. And the things that I was taught at school were just things that kind of inspired me to go home and argue with my dad about his faith. And unfortunately for him, he couldn't really defend his faith very well. He didn't know the Bible very well. He didn't know biblical archaeology. All these things I ended up learning when I became a Christian that support the Bible. My dad was not equipped with that information. So it just pushed me further and further. Because then, as him and my mom were divorcing, I started to develop this really unhealthy codependent relationship with her because I felt this need to protect her in the divorce, you know, just all that stuff that happens when parents split up like that, and young adult children are involved. So yeah, they divorced. I had moved out and was living with my mom, and I was just on my path of, you know, new age spirituality. I mean, I never became super devoted to any one particular discipline. I just read a lot of Hindu Vedas and Buddhist scriptures. You know, I met a guy online many years ago who was a Muslim from Tunisia, and we had an online relationship for a few years. And so I read the Quran with him. I basically would read any kind of religious text except for the Bible. But when I went around arguing with people about the Bible, funny enough, I always acted like I read it. Like, as an unbeliever, I had no shame in just being a complete liar about, oh, yeah, I've read that and it's not real. It's not true. I would walk around being like, I've read the Bible and the Torah. Like,
red flag.
And here's the scary part. No Christian ever corrected me on that. And no Christian ever noticed that. Okay. So that, you know, that's a problem I noticed when I became a Christian. Like, whoa, nobody ever caught I mean, I was so clearly full of crap.
Really fact check. That was not difficult to call out.
No, that is not difficult to fact. You didn't need Google back then for that one. So really what I started to really deal with in my 20s was more alcoholism, addiction to pills, severe depression. I started having epileptic seizures when I was 18, and the drinking did not help that condition. And I went through a few years where I was having all kinds of grand mal seizures at the place that I worked, and spent a few stints in the hospital. Just went through a really low time. I never really got taught any life skills. So when that time to move out of the house and start a life came, I had no idea what I was doing. And I was attracting all the wrong people into my life. So, I'm basically, slid through my 20s working menial jobs, trying to rent cheap rooms out of people's houses. I never had my own apartment, never had my own place like that. I guess you could say I was in a state of arrested development, like I just was stuck in this immaturity. And all the while I had my, different spiritual practices. I did yoga, I did meditation. Eventually I got into channeling, but that came after some traumatic stuff in my life. Basically, there was like this turning point in my life. I had a real bad mental breakdown and ended up in checking myself into a mental institution. And I met a guy in there who was a member of NA. And he and I both got released from that place on the same day. And so he took me to my first NA meeting. And so that was the first step in my life of like coming out of just the fog and darkness of alcoholism and binge drinking. I had a problem with binge drinking, and started going to NA. And I think that's probably where God started planting seeds in my heart, because it is a spiritual program and they do encourage you to find a higher power. Now, they are also very anti-Christ. They like to say they're not a religion and they're not a cult, but boy, howdy, if you step out of line, you get treated like you left the cult. Okay. But it was what I needed at the time in my life. It got me clean. I started working a program, working with sponsors, connecting with other women in my community, having a little kind of family of my own. Because at that point, my dad had moved away and I really only had my mom and my little sister and my little brother around. And my little brother and my little sister have had their issues to where there's a lot of estrangement in my family. My mom's side of the family has this legacy of estrangement where at any given time, one of the aunts is fighting with the mom, or the aunts are all fighting with my uncle, or they're all angry at my grandma, or, and so that legacy was kind of passed down to me and my siblings. So I'd be in and out of relationships with my sister and my brother. So I kind of was my own little island, and NA became, this little haven for me. But it also was a dangerous place that dangerous people come to that I didn't realize. I didn't know what a sociopath was. Let's just put it that way. Okay. I didn't understand that you can meet a person who can be just charming as all get out and charismatic and make you fall in love with them, and they're actually a wicked, evil person on the inside who's just using you. So basically what happened after a few years of being in NA, I met a guy there named Casey, and he's kind of this, I only tell the story about him because I feel like the level of darkness that he brought me into is truly the catalyst that took me to the place of eventually coming to the Lord. So it may seem irrelevant or random, but I kind of have to tell some of the story. So it's a long story. I'm going to try to summarize it as well as I can. I've tried to put a lot of the memories of this story out of my mind for a very long time. So I'm also going to try not to get emotional about it, but it was a really hard time in my life. Basically, I met this guy. He was covered in prison tattoos. Okay. So there's my first mistake, is thinking to myself, he literally walked into the room and he had this big tattoo on his throat. And I thought, oh, don't talk to the guy with the neck tattoo. That was my first thought when I saw him. And I should have listened to that thought because he came in and he ended up sharing. He was one of those people that would like command the meeting. Like once he started sharing, he said all these amazing, profound things about recovery. And I was like sold. I was just sold. I was like, oh my gosh, he's working the program. He's serious. He's, if I had known the word repentant back then, he's repentant. Like I thought, this guy was back on the straight and narrow. So I started dating him. It turned out he had like a 15-year history in the prison system. He wasn't just a guy that, you know, was in desperate times and held up a store one time and did a few years. Like he had a 15-year history at that point in his life, and he was only 20 something, 28 maybe. It's, you know, been going on since he was juvenile. So I was not going to judge. I was going to be tolerant. I was going to look past his past. And so basically it was the textbook story of love bombing, told me everything I wanted to hear, convinced me to quit my job that I was working. I moved in with my sister because her husband at the time had blown up his hand with a firework on New Year's Eve, and she had to go back to work, and they had 3 kids and she needed help around the house. So me and my brother both moved into the house with her, and my brother was giving her all his paychecks, and I was like cleaning and cooking 24/7. And Casey was supposed to come live with us, and he came and he stayed for like 2 nights, and he ended up disappearing one day. And I found out from his mom that this was his pattern. He goes to prison for a few years, he gets out, he's good for a few months, and then he absconds from parole, and he goes back into, he was, you know, was dealing drugs and running guns and all kinds of stuff down in Denver. So he disappeared after making all these promises to me. And this was at a point in my life where I had had increasingly horrible relationships. Like I was increasingly choosing worse and worse guys. And I had just been living this life of working really hard and never having anything to show for it, like in terms of working a full 40-hour week and only being able to rent a room somewhere. And that feminine side of me, that side of me that's programmed to actually desire to be a stay-at-home wife and mother, was starting to come out, and I was starting to feel that. So when he came around and started making these promises that, you know, he makes all this money, and, you know, he's going to pay my rent, and, you know, it's going to be the traditional gender roles, and, you know, you can finally stop working, and, you know, I love you enough to do this. And like, he made all those promises to me. So when he disappeared, it was like this scary thing. But I would say that I had some kind of Stockholm syndrome going on. Like I was totally brainwashed by him, believing, you know, when he would call me and tell me he'd be back, he was not coming back. But he did end up coming to get me after Valentine's Day. He picked me up and took me down to Denver from Fort Collins. And I ended up getting stuck down there with him for like a week. The car that he had kept breaking down. We were staying in increasingly scary hotels. I didn't know that the whole time I was down there with him, he was shooting up meth and selling meth and had a loaded weapon with him. Well, I ended up finding out about the weapon, but he was down there committing all this criminal activity, and he'd like leave me in places while I'd go do these things. He also was seeing another girl while I was down there. So he was leaving me in one place, going and being with her, and then coming back with me and picking me up. He was printing counterfeit money and buying drugs with this counterfeit money. So then there ended up being like serious thugs after him while we were down. So then he's like trying to hide from these people that want to kill him. By the end of the week, the car that we had been driving in had finally broke down, and we were outside of his friend's house, and the snow started falling, and he started freaking out and talking about how bad he wanted to punch me. And I was like, he hadn't switched his flip on me like that until that point, where I saw the real crazy come out in terms of, like, I thought he was going to start getting violent with me. And in the course of the week that we were down there, he also had sexually assaulted me 3 different times. And it got worse each time. But each time I had this psychological thing going on in my mind where I was like rationalizing what was happening. And when my sister and my brother were calling me to see when I was going to come home, because I was like, I had made these commitments to them to be there helping at the household there, I couldn't actually tell them what was going on because I was on his phone. He was with me the whole time. I couldn't actually tell him what was going on because he was like dealing with all these weird, I was just terrified. I didn't quite know the magnitude of everything that was happening down there. And then these sexual assaults happened, and they like completely messed with my head. And by that final night that we were there, he started freaking out on me in the car and screaming about how now he's going to have to go hold up a gas station so that he can get money to get the car fixed. And I'm going to have to sit in the car and be his getaway driver and get the car to start so I can drive him away while he knocks off a liquor store or something. And so I'm starting to freak out in my mind about, oh my God, what am I going to do? And out of the blue, I had a friend who lived down in the Denver area, this guy named Derek, and he'd been my best friend for many years. And he just randomly out of the blue texted me and said, "Are you okay?" It was like 10:30 at night. I'm like, "No, I'm not okay. I need a ride back to Fort Collins." And by this time, Casey, when Derek came to pick me up, Casey didn't care. I was just a burden on him down there. He had only brought me down there to try and keep up the facade of our relationship that was never a relationship to begin with. Like, if you see those story times on YouTube and TikTok where people talk about this whole relationship they had with a man and they were thinking all these things they thought were reality and it was all a lie, that is what I experienced with some extreme violence on top of it. So my friend Derek picked me up and drove me home in the middle of the night. And that night I got to my sister's house and Casey called me to apologize. And so I went through the cycle with him for a little while. For a couple more months, he was still dangling the carrot of him coming back. And it was about 2 months after all of that. I was staying at a friend's house, crashing. I didn't have a place to live. I can't remember. Oh, yeah. I had this whole falling out with my sister at her house and she threw me out. So I had nowhere to go. I had given up the room I was renting. So I ended up at a friend's house watching her house for her while she was at rehab, a friend from NA. And I was drunk one night and I called an ex-boyfriend and asked him to come over. And he came over and, we were getting romantic and he realized, he's like, something is not right with you. Have you been drinking? And because he knew that I had been in NA, that I had been trying to be clean. And I was like, yeah, but don't worry, who cares? And he stopped me dead in my tracks and was like, something is wrong with you. What happened to you? And that was the first time that I spoke the words that Casey had raped me. I was like, and my ex, bless his heart, he was the right person to call that night. He was like, we are not, look, I will stay here with you and comfort you, but you need to go get help. I'm not going to be romantic with you. You need to get help. And so that was when I realized, like, oh my gosh, like all this stuff happened to me while I was down there and I hadn't been processing it. I had just turned back to alcohol to try and just numb all the pain and delusion of everything that was happening. So I did eventually go to the police and try to report that. Once they finally got him back in prison after he had absconded. So I went and reported it because I wasn't afraid of him coming to find me anymore because he had threatened me. He had done a veiled threat when I told him that I had realized, hey, you raped me like 3 times while I was down there and that's not right. And he threatened me that if I decided to do anything about that, I would rue the day. So once they caught him, I went, made the report. Nothing came of it because it was like 2 months after everything happened. I had no proof. They couldn't adjudicate that in court, and that was devastating for me, but I kind of knew. But I felt like I wanted it on the record because he was going to do it to someone else. This guy's a habitual criminal. He is not a normal person. But one of the things that I learned about him while we were together was that he was a Crowley Satanist. And I didn't really know what that meant back then. I didn't know. If I had known then, even if I hadn't been a Christian, I probably would have stayed away from him because that's like the depths of the worst kind of Satanism if you're following Crowley. And he told me that a lot of men, when they go to prison and when they're habitual prison guys, when that's just where they go to live, a lot of them go one of two ways. They go into either Islam and Christianity, or they get into straight up Satanism and witchcraft and the 48 laws of power and learning how to manipulate women. And he was talking to me about, oh, have you ever seen, those women that are like just completely devoted to a guy who's in prison for the rest of his life? Like they're never going to be with him, but they spend all their money putting it on his books and they send him care packages and they go to visit, religiously. Like, have you ever wondered about those women? And I'm like, well, not really, I guess. But, he's like, yeah, most of those guys, they're doing spells on those women inside in the prison. Like they're putting spells on those women to come see them and send them money and do those things. And it didn't dawn on me at the time that he told me that, like, that is evil. That's evil. Even from a standpoint of an actual Wiccan, that's evil. Okay? Because you're not supposed to do magic on people that like does things against their will. So again, this is something that will be relevant here as I get to this part of the story, because all of this stuff went down with him. I lost my place to live with my sister. I was staying at a friend's house and she had told me I could come live with her. And then when she got out of rehab, she came home and decided, never mind. So then I was homeless again. So I went to stay with my mom and stepdad in their RV. They were doing the snow bunny thing where they'd leave and go to Arizona and New Mexico in the winters and come back to Colorado in the spring and summer. So I stayed with them for a summer, and it was getting down to the wire where they were getting ready to leave. And I was trying to get myself into this shelter. There was a domestic violence shelter in Fort Collins, a safe house. And you basically just had to call every day and see if there was a bed open. And my parents were like getting ready to leave the next day, and they gave me their truck. They both had a Ford Ranger. So my mom gave me her Ford Ranger, and it was kind of like I was planning on sleeping in that thing once they were gone. And thankfully, by the grace of God, I got into that shelter on my birthday. It was on my birthday that I got into that shelter. And I got into the shelter and I got into a temporary area. So in the temporary part of the shelter, you've got 6 weeks. And there's another part of the shelter that you can apply for, and it's a special program. And there's only like 6 rooms back there, but it was a long-term place where you could stay as long as you needed to until you got on your feet and were able to get out. So I really was just desperate to get into that program. And by the grace of God, I got into that program. So what I really needed at that time was a place of safety. And that was what the safe house felt like for a while. So I got my own room back there. I had tried to keep working my job that I had at some car lot, but I was so screwed up from the PTSD. I was having these crazy crying fits where I wouldn't even like be consciously crying. I would just have tears just pouring from my face. I could not hold myself together. It was not just psychological. I could tell this was like my ex had said I needed to get help. So one day I went in and just randomly quit. I told the guy, look, I went through some really traumatic stuff a few weeks ago and I can't work. I need to go get help. So thankfully I got into this shelter and I didn't have to pay rent the whole time I was there. So I was able to focus on myself, get back into my program, get clean again, get off all the alcohol and pills, and really just focus on healing. So when I was in the shelter, I dove way back in seriously into the New Age practices. And I was actually working with a lady who was Casey's, he called her his aunt, but she was actually a cousin. She just was so much older than him that he always referred to her as Aunt Jackie throughout his life. And very sweet lady, and probably one of the perfect people to have in my life at that time, because all of Casey's family knew how he was. So when everything happened with me, none of them, they all believed me. Now, his mom didn't feel sorry for me at all. I think whatever personality disorder he has, I think he gets it from her. But looking back, I realized that his dad had actually emailed me when he and I first got together, and he was trying to subtly warn me that Casey was a pathological liar. And it didn't click in my brain until all the way after the fact. So I had reached out to Jackie. I can't remember why, but I told her what happened and she felt horrible for me and offered to do free. Oh, what did she do? Healing touch sessions. She had her whole little office. The Good Juju group is what it was called. And she did Reiki healing touch type stuff. So I started going to see her and she gave me free sessions for, oh gosh, at least a year. It was very, very sweet of her. She just felt awful for what happened. And it was through that time that I started to realize that whatever I was doing for healing wasn't necessarily protecting me, because about 6 months into being at the shelter, I had an experience where I fully believe, because Casey was into all this occult stuff too. He was way more into it than I was. He astrally projected himself into my room at the shelter. And I was wide awake because I had gotten up to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night. I had come back to my bed. I laid in my bed and this apparition shows up in my room and it's him in his prison stuff. And there was no audible speaking, but I could hear him. I could feel him trying to apologize to me. I had been having these random thoughts to go visit him in prison. And I was freaking out because I'm like, those aren't my thoughts. I don't want to go visit him. So I knew he was trying to do witchcraft on me to manipulate me. At that time, I was learning about sociopaths and supply, psychic vampires. I was realizing, oh God, I'm just another person for him to use. So, this moment in the shelter was horrific for me because here I was in this room behind 6 foot thick walls and 5 security doors. You can't get into this place physically where I am, and I'm not safe from this guy. I can't escape this person. He can psychically attack me. So it felt very disempowering. It was a very hopeless feeling that no matter what, he could still violate my space and my privacy. So I still, it wasn't clicking. So I continued. I dove further into the Reiki healing. I dove further into learning about channeling. I started using a lot of the crystals I had. My mom and my stepdad were rock hounds. I'm a rock hound. We've dug up rocks our whole lives, and they found this spot up in Colorado. It was just this cache of endless beautiful crystals. I mean, we've been getting crystals out of there for going on 10 years now. But I started using those crystals in my meditations and channeling. My best friend was starting to really get herself into actual work with crystal resonance therapy and similar forms of Reiki. So I was diving deeper into those beliefs and practices. Do you have any questions? Should I stop real quick and see if there's any?
I'm really enjoying your story. Thank you so much.
So I stayed in the shelter for a while. I think I was in there for almost a year. And through Jackie, actually, this was, I want to tell the story about the first prayer that I ever had that was answered. Because up until this point, I really was doing kind of the NA type prayer, praying to a higher power. I think NA was this thing that kind of softened me up to the idea of a higher power and prayer and forgiveness.
Probably is. It probably is for many people.
Yes. So even though they can be very militant once you actually become a Christian in NA, it was actually, hey, they say it's not a religious program, but it definitely led me to my true religion in a roundabout way. So let me see, where am I at? Okay, so for that whole year that I was living in the shelter, I'd be driving around Fort Collins and I would have this little, I never said it as a real prayer to God. I didn't say the word God. I would call it divine source or the universe. But I would drive around and I would see people with campers sitting in their backyards collecting dust They never take them out. They never go camping in them. They're just sitting in their backyards. And I would just think, gosh, man, if someone could just donate me a little camper, I've got a truck. I can go park this somewhere. I can park it in the trailer park at the north side of town. Like I could have a little house that nobody could take away from me. Because for my whole 20s, I always lived with really unstable people who would like throw me out randomly for no reason because they had their own issues. So I really needed something that was my own at that point that no one could say, get out. You just got to leave. I lived in boxes for so many years. I would move into a place and not really unpack because I always felt like I needed to be able to throw my stuff in my truck and drive away just in case. So I had been driving around having this thought in my head for a long time. And I went to do a session with Jackie, and she told me that her sister-in-law, I think it was, in Wyoming, which is where I live now, had a camper sitting in her field for like 20 years. They were doing nothing with his old vintage Terry Coach camper, and would I like to have it? And I was like, yeah. I had never told Jackie anything, never said anything about that to her. It's just this little quiet prayer I had, a wish, really. And so I ended up inheriting this little Terry Coach camper that I was able to get a spot in the trailer park on the north side of town with a lot rent that I could afford, with the part-time work that I did, and got out of the shelter into my own camper. And the way that the timing worked out was that my stepdad was able to go get that camper for me from the storage place on my birthday. So a year prior, I spent my birthday in that shelter. And then one whole year later, I had my camper, and I had my camper to spend my first night in my camper. So my stepdad and my brother helped me get the camper into the spot, and we cleaned it out because it had like 20 years of dust in it, and got it all set up for me to sleep in there that night. And they packed up and left. And I sat in the camper and laid on the floor and hugged the floor. And for the first time in my whole life, I thanked God. I said, thank you, God, not divine source, not the universe. Like it was the first time I had recognized a prayer had been answered. So that was like the little seed.
I have goosebumps everywhere.
Yeah, that was the little seed. Now, I want to clarify that a couple of years leading up to all this, through my time in NA, there was a seeker-friendly church that a lot of us NA people like to go to called Vineyard, because they didn't talk about sin. They weren't really preaching much from the Bible. It was good music and free coffee and a place to socialize with my friends. And sometimes it was a place where I would go and trauma dump on the Christians and let them pray for me, because I thought, oh, energy is energy, and but there would be times that I would be sitting in those church services, and I would hear this little voice in the very back of my mind, a still small voice that would say, you're being called to Christ. And I would chuckle at that voice. I'd be like, where did that thought come from? Like, get out of here. That's ridiculous. I know so much more than these Christians. I'm so much more enlightened than them. Why would I ever be called to Christ? So that had been going on for a couple of years. And then I had this experience where I thanked God for the first time ever. And then a couple of weeks after that, I was feeling this strong urge during my prayers, because by that point in time, I was doing daily prayers, but I was praying to archangels. Okay. And I don't know how many of these were actually biblical angels and how many of them are just because the New Age likes to appropriate a lot of biblical language and biblical characters. And that's one of the things that they do, is they pray to the archangel. So for about 2 weeks, I was feeling this urge during my prayers to pray to Jesus Christ, call on Jesus Christ. And I was laughing at that thought. I'm like, why would I'm not going to call on Jesus Christ. He's just ascended master. I didn't disrespect him, but I don't need to call on him in prayer. Like he doesn't rank high enough. So I'm having those thoughts for like 2 weeks during my prayers. So I go over to my best friend's house for a crystal resonance session. And she calls in Mother Mary during this session. Okay. So this is just another thing that's like warming. I think this was warming me up to biblical words, not even concepts, but biblical words and names, and making me more comfortable with the idea. So I did this session with her, and she sent me home with this little list of, take the salt bath and do the sage and blah, blah, blah. So I come home, and I was actually staying at my parents. My parents were in the same trailer park as me, but their RV was parked there. So I was at their RV watching it while they were out somewhere on a trip somewhere, watching their dogs and having a break, because the RV was like a land yacht compared to my little Terry coach. So I'm like, yeah, I'm in the mansion. I just got this residence session done. We called in Mother Mary. I'm going to go home and do all this self-care and cleanse myself and all this stuff. So I go back to the RV and I take my salt bath and I get the sage out, and my mom, being the weird half-cath that she was, had this Virgin of Guadalupe statue in her RV. So I'm like saging around the statue and, do all my little ritual and get ready for bed and lay down in bed. And I start to say my evening prayers. And I pray to this, and I call in this archangel. I call in this archangel. And I heard that voice of call on Jesus Christ, call on Jesus Christ. And so at that point, I kind of was like, okay, why not? I'll call on Jesus Christ. So the moment I said his name, I said, and I call on Jesus Christ, the Spirit dropped on me. I didn't know that's what was happening at the time. I didn't know the terminology for this. Up until this point, I left out a really important part. Up until this point, I had been doing these channelings where I was calling in what I now know are demons. But at the time that I was calling them in, I didn't understand they were unclean spirits. I thought they were angels. So I would invite these entities into my body, and there was this strange fight of will. I didn't understand any of that at the time. But these entities would approach, and I would feel this blackness, this dark fear, evil, every kind of dark feeling you can think. That's the sensation that I would feel when these entities would first come upon me. And then there would be this battle of will, because you have to give them permission to come inside your body, at least with the channeling kind of stuff I was doing. And I didn't quite know that language. It just felt like this weird resistance where I wanted to resist this dark, evil, dirty. It felt unclean. I didn't know the word then, but I always felt like I needed a shower after these sessions. But after I would have that battle of wills with them, and I would give over my will and let them enter me, it was full on euphoria. It was like the most amazing drug you could ever take. And the things that I would see and the messages that they would give me were amazing. And it all was confirmation for me at the time that, oh, this is all so true. But I didn't recognize that what I felt when they would first come upon me was pure evil. Oh, awful. But they would make me forget about it as soon as they were in my body, because I felt euphoria. But the night that I called on Jesus, when his spirit came, there was no evil. There was no darkness. It was the most beautiful, loving. I felt like I was in a river of love and compassion. I can't put words to it. I felt the most amazing sensation of love and comfort. And I didn't have to fight my will. He wasn't trying to overcome my will. He was just revealing himself to me. And I knew it was Jesus. It was Jesus Christ. Like, I had this knowing. I had never believed it in my whole life. Even when I talked about him being an ascended master, I still had all of the beliefs that, oh, he possibly never existed, or he really went to India and became a Buddhist teacher there. And, I had all those crazy beliefs about him. But when his spirit came to me, I knew exactly who he was. And then not only did he reveal himself to me, he revealed the Father. And that was like a whole nother mind-blowing thing, because I not only definitely never believed in Jesus Christ, and definitely never believed in God the Father, never even knew there was a difference, never knew there was a distinction. I never cared. always rejected the scriptures vehemently, belligerently. And he came upon me that night and dropped his spirit into me. And I'm going to tell part of the story that I've always been afraid to tell because I was worried that people would judge me. But I'm kind of at the point in my walk where I want people to start understanding that God will absolutely meet you where you're at if your heart is willing. And if you're willing to answer him, he will take you on baby steps, no matter how little you understand. Because that night, I still was completely engulfed in New Age belief. I had a lifetime of believing in reincarnation and no understanding of salvation or life after death, nothing like that. So I had a lot of unlearning to do, and I had no one around who understood that I had just been given the gift of the Spirit and then I needed to be discipled. So I was still on my own after this experience. So that night, I never would have picked up a Bible. And God knew that. But he knew that I wasn't afraid of Gnostic books. So he guided me to what I believe is the least offensive of all the books. And that's why I believe he felt it was safe to take me to that one, which is the Gospel of Thomas. And the Gospel of Thomas is basically just plagiarized verses from the synoptic gospels. So I was reading through, a lot of these parables are actually in the real gospel. So I was reading through them and felt an understanding of them that I hadn't felt before. And it was like opening my mind to, oh, like Christ can guide me. He can unlock this wisdom and knowledge for me, So for the first few months that I had received the Spirit, I was not a Christian. I didn't know that I was being called to be a Christian. I thought I was having this experience with Christ, like initiating me maybe into some kind of, level of, healing that I'm going to be doing for people. And, I didn't know. So I was trying. But I was on fire for him and I wanted to know him and I wanted to understand him better than I had tried to before, which is not. So what do? I order a Gnostic Bible instead of ordering a Bible because I had that programming in me where I was like, oh, well, the truth is not going to be in that book. If I want to learn about Jesus, I need to go read the books that they banned, all the stuff they don't want you to know about Jesus. So and I was still doing crystal resonance therapy sessions with my best friend. Her and I were still going up. We were going up to the Buddhist temple and doing these rituals up at the temple where she was working Reiki on me. And I was like asking her to like call in biblical prophets, like, oh, call in Elijah and call in so-and-so. And I'm just saying names I just knew from scripture. I didn't know who they were. I didn't know anything about the book. But I was doing all that. And I'll never forget when we were riding up to the temple for the last time. And I started telling her, I think I'm being called into Christianity. And she was like, that is not where I'm being called, because I got that Gnostic Bible and thankfully I had the Spirit in me at that point. So I started reading it and it wasn't sitting right. It was like, I'm not learning about him in here.
It was still your bridge, right? Because you probably wouldn't have gone straight to the real Bible immediately.
No.
You just needed to be able to see with your own eyes
Yes.
and feel that this is off and okay, fine, I'll go check that out instead.
That's exactly how it went. And it wasn't even at that point, I didn't think, okay, let me go read the Bible. I was working at this little coffee shop in a bus depot, and there was a little free library that we had. And I walked into work one day and I had forgotten to bring the book with me that I was reading. And I looked on the shelf and there was a King Jimmy. And I'm like, hey, you know what? I've been trying to find out about this Jesus guy. I feel like he really changed something in me. And I need to learn about him, because that night that I experienced that river of compassion, I feel like he reached into my soul and he like untied a knot that was at the core of my soul from the time I was a child. All the things I was trying to heal on all the Reiki and the crystal resonance therapy and all that stuff I was doing trying to heal myself, he healed wounds in me in that moment, just the moment that I met him, not even through the night, like the moment I met him and he gave me the Spirit, something in me was fixed. So I went into work that day and saw that King James and was like, I got nothing else to read. It's a slow day. I'm going to start reading the Bible. So I pulled it up and I started on page 1 because I, had other people who were like, oh, you should read the book of John. And it was like, no, I want to start on page 1. I want to understand this. And I'll never forget getting to Exodus and having my mind just be blown, because I was one of those people that walked around for years slandering Yahweh as this evil tyrant. And look at this mean, horrible stuff he did to the Egyptians. And he's such a big meanie. And then I'm reading it. I'm like, oh my God, look what these Egyptians are doing to his people. And like, oh, look how they're directly defying him. Oh, and look how, he's given them an opportunity to stop the plagues and let his people go. And they let him go and they go get him back. And like, I was realizing the justice, the righteousness, the consequences of sin. Like it was all clicking. And so I knew, honestly, after the first page of Genesis, I knew, oh my God, this is the truth. This sits right with my spirit. This makes sense. So I started reading the Bible.
That's amazing that if that was your first go at the Bible, that you actually understood what was happening. That is being spirit filled. I know in my own experience, I couldn't even make sense of the NIV when I was trying to read it. It took a lot of time before I could understand King James. Certainly not the first time I tried picking it up. I had no idea what was going on.
No, he definitely gave me a clarity that, now there was still a lot of confusion. I started going to, because at first I'll never forget the moment I stopped believing in reincarnation. I had been reading the Bible for a few days and I was sitting in my camper, chilling with my dog and thinking about, reincarnation and how does this square with, what the Bible says. And because at that time I thought heaven, I didn't know Sheol and resurrection, but it started to dawn on me that a loving, merciful, kind creator would never make a system of reincarnation. Reincarnation is actually
it's actually
horribly unjust. Off. And the more you learn about karma, because people think karma is like this surface level easy, oh, you do bad is done to you. No, man, karma gets into this weird law of attraction type thing where then you add on all your past lives and your life might suck right now, not because of anything you've done in this life, but 4 lifetimes ago you've got karma that you're still paying for. You're paying karmic debt from 1,000 lifetimes ago, and you need to do past life regression to find out what you did and how to fix that karmically and all that. Like, it gets really cruel, this endless cycle of death and rebirth. There's no end to it. And the only possible end is if you possibly reach nirvana, which like nobody can do. So I had that moment where I was like, oh my gosh, reincarnation doesn't make any sense. I also had the horrible realization that abortion is murder, because I had an abortion when I was in my early 20s and I honestly never felt bad about it. I never gave it a second thought. But I had that moment where I was sitting and realized, oh my God, I'm a murderer. And I brought it to God and was like, oh my God, forgive me. I was completely brainwashed into the feminist, that's just a clump of cells, and here's your list of excuses for why.
That was you and your Bible in your camper. So I don't know where your story is going to go from here, but this was not you in a church being told what the Bible said. So from the get-go, you were reading it with your own eyes. You had the Holy Spirit helping you understand it, and did you ever have to unlearn? Did you then start learning church stuff that you then backed up, or?
I had been reading my Bible at home myself the whole time I started going to a little non-denominational church. And so I was realizing quite quickly that I would go to the Bible study before church service. And I was getting excited about, oh, look at this Nephilim stuff. And, I was like, want to talk about Genesis 6. And, I'm in this was a tiny little Church of Christ, non-denominational. There's like 40 members of this church. Marty, the pastor, had been friends with my mom and my late stepfather years before I became a Christian. And a very sweet guy. He actually baptized me. That was another thing that I found disturbing when I became a Christian. Another thing with the Spirit, I started feeling this overwhelming urge to get baptized, which again, I I had been baptized when I was 7, didn't know anything about it, didn't make any sense to me. But once I became a Christian, I like felt like I needed to go do that outward symbol. And I was still going to the Vineyard church at that point, and this was just such a huge church. I went and tried to talk to somebody. I wanted to tell someone my testimony. I was so excited. I thought I was joining this new family of all these loving people that were just going to welcome me with open arms and be so excited that a sinner has repented. And I was in for a rude awakening with that. But I went over to the secretary for the church and was like, hey, I really feel the urgency to get baptized. And she was like, oh, okay. Give me your email. We do mass baptisms every 3 months. We'll let you know, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, wait a minute. I haven't gotten to the book of Acts yet, but I was familiar with the story of, was it the Ethiopian? And who baptized him? Was it Paul that baptized him?
Oh, I
One of the apostles, found out, you haven't been baptized yet?
Night, right? You're ready. Like, there's no waiting. Let's go.
Yeah, what's stopping us? Let's go right now. So I felt that sense of urgency, and this church was like, had so many people it's discipling. It's like, oh, we do mass baptisms. No, I wanted my own special baptism. I don't want to get baptized with a whole bunch of other people I don't know. This is you guys don't understand how special this is for me. You don't understand what a big deal this is. Like, for God to get me, that's a huge deal. I need my own baptism. So it's like, thankfully, I had that urgency. And so I knew Marty. I contacted him. I was like, hey, will you baptize me? I really feel like I need to get this done. I had a fear of, if I get hit by a bus, and I didn't know back then, that I still would have gone to the right side of Sheol if I hadn't been baptized. But I had this feeling of, I really need to get this done. So I had been baptized at that church. And so that's when I decided to start going to his, because that seeker friendly church was just not intimate enough for me. But then I started going to the small church, and nobody really wanted to get into the deep stuff. We would read our little thing for Bible study, and then the guy would put that down, and then he'd reach over and pick up the commentary and start reading from the commentary and tell us what we're supposed to think about what we just read. So I was going to that little church and just reading my Bible at home. And one of the first things that I noticed was being taught differently was the Sabbath. I got to the point in the scriptures about keeping the Sabbath and was like, well, that seems pretty clear. I started to realize that I needed a path. I needed an instruction manual for life, because I had been doing things my own darn way my whole life, and it got me nothing but trauma and, spiritual darkness and, letting wicked, unclean spirits into my soul, to channel messages through me. Like, it got me into dark places. So I was just so devoted. I was so in love with God for saving me and healing that spiritual blindness, removing those scales from my eyes, that I was willing to do anything he said. And I didn't care what people at church said. I didn't care what theologians or pastors believed. Like, I felt like if I'm reading it in this book and it's clearly telling me to do a certain thing, I'm going to do it, because he knows better than I do. He's shown me. He gave me 20 some years of my life to show him doing things my way. And then he came along and showed me his ways are better. So I started feeling a conviction to keep the Sabbath. And then I also came across the clean and unclean animals in Leviticus 11. And I had a conversation with him because it didn't make sense to me at first. I was like, why these animals? It seems so random and arbitrary. But I had this little conversation with him in my head where I was like, God, if you can explain to me why these animals are why this is unclean, I've got no problem cutting that stuff out of my diet if I can just kind of understand. And it was like he downloaded the understanding into my brain in that moment. It was like, these are trash compactors. These animals were created to be the cleanup crew. They were not created to be on the menu. They are yucky. They're literally unclean. And it was in that moment, I had this switch where basically any craving I had for pork was like gone. The only thing I ever struggled with, still craving occasionally, is crab legs. Like other than that, shrimp, lobster, pork, that was really the unclean meats that I ate. I can't think of any. I mean, I never ate any like exotic alligator.
Have a craving for a crow or a dog?
No, never. I did eat ostrich once, which was weird because it was like a red meat. It was not like poultry,
I know
but
that
never.
that one surprised me when I found that one in the Bible. It did surprise me because it's a little bit less obvious than a crow that you picture.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So I started having these changes, and I didn't start feeling like the people at church like were bad people or anything. It just started to become kind of like a spiritual desert for me. Like I just wasn't being fed at church on Sundays anymore. Like I was keeping Sabbath. I had gone through this another negotiation with the father. When I first started figuring out the Sabbath, I was like, well, there's people saying that this stuff changed, but I feel like I'm reading in your book. I don't see anywhere where it says that it changed. So Lord, if the Sabbath didn't change and you want me to keep it, please help me find a job that will allow me to keep the Sabbath, because I was going through a transition at that point in my life where the coffee shop at the bus station was getting shut down. And I had been doing the other job I was doing was construction cleaning with a gal. And I was just getting burnt out on that. The hours with that were just so early in the morning, and it was just becoming too much. And so I had this little idea to go get a Christian business directory from a local gas station and look for Christian owned businesses, because I felt I would have a better chance of finding someone who might be more respectful of my beliefs if they were also Christian. And that was the case. I lucked out, or I was blessed, I should say. And there was this jewelry manufacturing place, this guy named Dave Clack in Fort Collins. He's a photographer and an artist, and he makes jewelry, and he does this really cool, he prints his photography onto, at first it was like different kinds of paper that we use, but then he moved into metal. But he had a gallery in Old Town, and he had a production facility. So typically when they hired people, they had to be available for weekends because they would also want you to work the gallery, but they were just looking for someone for the production. So when I said, hey, I'm feeling like I want to keep the Sabbaths, and I'm also going to I was realizing his feasts hadn't been done away with either. And, I'm going to need extra days for these feast days, and these would be religious observances. And would you guys be okay with that? And his wife, who had interviewed me, a sweet lady, oh yeah, that'd be totally fine. We can just get you in 9 to 5, Monday through Friday at the production facility, and that's great. And you just tell us ahead of time when you need your holy days off. And it was wonderful. And I worked there for a good 4 years. And, there was a lot of growing pains at that place. Dave was not built to be a manager. He wasn't built to run a team. It was a hard place to work for a while in terms of emotional abuse, basically.
It was steady, right? And
it was steady work, and they were Christians, and I would pray with them. We would do employee evaluations, and we would pray together, and I could tell them about some serious things going on in my life and share things with them. And despite the rocky road that we had building our work relationship, it actually was a blessing. And there was a time where I put in my notice, was like, I'm quitting, I'm getting out of here. And Dave called me in the next day and was like, what can we do to get you to stay? And I'm like, well, do you want to know the truth? Because I'm going to tell you. It's like, yes. And so by the time I left that place, I'm like giving Dave a big old hug, and we were like, we were fellow Christians. It was a very wonderful place for me to be at that time in my life. And they respected my religious observances, and God was just confirming one thing after another for me. He's like,
but that on its own is a miracle too, right? Because not all of us have had that experience with Christians who don't believe in keeping
absolutely,
or that Saturday is the Sabbath. So it's actually incredible. I think sometimes your chances of being able to take those holidays off are greater if you're working for atheists than for Christians in
interesting.
So
Yeah.
that's awesome.
Yeah, that wasn't my experience. They were very, they understood there's a whole bunch of different denominations. They know there's Christians who keep the Sabbath.
It didn't phase them. That's incredible.
Yeah, they didn't know that there were Christians who keep the feasts, but they learned that from me, and they're like, oh, that is so interesting. They were very, very wonderful, very nice Christian brother and sister in the Lord. So I started keeping the Sabbath. I stopped going to the Sunday church just more because I didn't want to argue with people. I was tempted to like bring up things and, wanted to correct. And I at least had the wisdom to know I didn't need to be correcting people. Like I needed to just kind of, all right, well, this is just going to be my walk. And then that's how I kind of got into the online community, because of course I was able to find people who were doing Sabbath live streams. Rob Skiba, this was way back when it was still Rob and John Hall, and it was just them before Now You See TV, before all of it was just Rob's virtual house church, and they would read the Torah portions on Sabbath. And I'd get up and I'd listen to my little stream, and have my little Sabbath day, take my dogs for a walk. I eventually ended up getting, as a result of everything that happened with Casey, I guess this is a part of my testimony I should share about Sean, because after my experience with Casey, I had completely sworn off men. I was like totally done. I was traumatized, broken. I was scared, terrified of men. I did end up meeting a guy in a Tool group. That used to be my religion, okay? New Age stuff aside, the band Tool.
Oh, I was
like
drills and screwdrivers. Okay,
Tool, the band, okay? I was obsessed with them. Music was a huge part of my life. That was, I didn't realize how much music dictated my emotions, but Tool was like this band that I just had on a pedestal. This actually is artwork from one of their guitars and one of their albums. I met a guy through a Tool group who lived in Chicago, and he was actually a very nice guy. And we ended up chatting, and we ended up doing an online type relationship. And I visited him in Chicago, and he visited me in Colorado. And I had plans to move to Chicago. Actually, he was a very nice guy. To this day, I really hope that a good lady came into his life, because he really deserves it. And he did something for me that I couldn't do for myself, because I became a Christian while we were in this long distance relationship, and things changed. Like the dynamic of our relationship changed, and he got kind of weird and uncomfortable. And I didn't try to preach to him or anything. I was not one of the, I knew too much as a former New Ager that, man, talking to people who don't believe this, who don't have the Spirit, it's a very, pick your battles, like if they're inviting you to have a conversation, have it. But man, like just preaching the gospel at them, never did anything for me. So I never pushed on him, but things definitely, the dynamic changed, the vibe changed. And there was a day where he brought up, this just isn't quite feeling right. And he didn't use the words unequally yoked, but he was saying we were unequally yoked. And I knew we were unequally yoked based on scripture, but I also had been reading through, I think it's in Corinthians, where it talks about the unbelieving spouse. Now, we weren't married, but I had settled on him. I wasn't planning on dating any other guys. He's a very nice guy. He wanted the traditional gender roles. I was falling more into being comfortable with that idea, and but he ended up breaking up with me because we were unequally yoked. He's like, this isn't going to work.
That's a blessing, right? Because you
total
somebody
absolute blessing.
I'm
yes,
eagerly waiting to hear where Sean was at that time, but I'm under the impression he was on the path before you, and then he could.
Oh yeah,
long
before me,
right? Like you don't. I mean, I wouldn't have wanted to. I would have not wanted to teach a husband or a boyfriend or anything like that.
No, and I didn't know that at the time. I didn't understand at the time. I was trying to honor the principle of no, you don't leave the unbelieving spouse, that's okay. And so I was trying to have that kind of heart towards him.
That was probably in some ways that was the correct thing, maybe, but it's a blessing that he let you go so that you could have the
He
life you.
did. Yeah, he knew. And I knew deep down, I just didn't want to accept it, because he was such a nice guy. And I really, I felt like, no, I found a good guy. I don't want to I finally was going to have the nice guy, the nice guy never gets the gal. And I was like, I need a nice guy, a non-threatening, nice guy. And he was the epitome of that. But I couldn't listen to Tool for a couple of years after I came to
That is dark.
Christ.
Tools kind of as dark as it gets.
And
I
there and I would say
there's these morphing kind of, what is that one? Oh, it's very dark. Tools like, anyway, I used to like them a lot too, but you could not pay me to listen.
there he Maynard has an elevated kind of ability to insert beliefs into his music that are truly brainwashing people. And I mean, the irony hit me when I became a believer of walking around with a shirt on that says Tool, and like what a tool you become for the, and even he like admitting I'm a tool for the industry. And he says in his songs, I sold my soul to make a record, and you bought one. It's like, so I'll never forget when he came out with his memoirs, and he's on the front of the cover with his hand in it, his hidden hand right on the cover of his book. I'm like, oh my gosh. So yeah, so what that thing we had in common, Tool, was not a commonality anymore. And bless his heart, he did for me what I couldn't do for myself. And I was sad at first. I was planning, but thank God I was planning to move all the way to Chicago. Ugh, I never want to go back to the Midwest. I never want to be in the overcast cut type of environment again. I got away from Ohio, and I'm glad my parents moved me away from there, because I have become a mountain girl. I really need scenery. I really need wide open spaces. I need mountains and rocks to dig for. And it's just not happening in Chicago. So thankfully I didn't move out there, but it was shortly after that, I think, that I started noticing Sean in these Torah groups. And I didn't have those kind of, it was not on my radar. Romance relationships was not. I was, after Mike, the guy in Chicago, I was like, I'm done. Because also I was realizing that I was falling into a niche of a niche of a niche. I would get more and more niche with everything I learned. So first I become a Christian, then I become a Torah keeping Christian, then I become a flat earth Christian. And once I realized the shape of the earth, I was like, oh, I'm never going to find a man. I'm getting a second dog. I'm getting a big dog who'll be my guard dog. And I'm good. I will be a celibate spinster for the rest of my life. I'm
Very, very similar reflection. I said, if you're going to give me anyone, let him be a Torah keeping flat earther.
See, I didn't even have the prayer in my head for God to bring me a man. I was like, I don't want one. I don't need one. I might need one when I need to carry this lawnmower out of the back of my truck that I just bought from Home Depot. But other than that, I don't need a man. I might need one to help me open this jar of pickles. But other than that, I do not need a man. So I was totally in that mindset. And I had advertisements all over my Facebook of no PMs. I made posts because as I got more into the Torah crowd, I did have guys sliding into my DMs to try and chat me up, and I just started putting out the disclaimers that, look, I'm not on here to meet guys or find love. Like, I'm on here to, it's funny because I feel like God started nudging me to start building my Facebook page in a different way at that time that I didn't understand, which I do now because of how I'm able to use Facebook to plant seeds and share with people things that edify them, and get my own edification from things reflecting back to me that I've shared with others. It's like, oh, you're going through that too, and all this confirmation. He's just built so much with my Facebook. But that back then I didn't really understand what he was doing, but I knew that I wasn't on Facebook to like air my dirty laundry or complain about my life or all the things that I used to do on Facebook. I'm like, I'm on here with a purpose. I'm sharing scripture. I'm sharing funny memes. You know, I'm bringing levity, bringing humor to people's lives.
Things that
You
I
know,
know, that's the things that when we started this interview, that exactly what you're naming is exactly what that's what comes through on your page. Exactly
yeah,
that.
that's what. And I, at the time, I had no idea because I didn't have followers. I didn't have a whole big friends list, you know. In fact, I had a whole bunch of people on my friends list from the Tool group and from my former New Age life who were like so angry at me because now I'm like posting scripture all of a sudden. My best friend completely disowned me. I mean, that was devastating. To this day, Katie, to this day, I pray for her every day. And yes, I stalk her page. I'm always looking at her page because I'm like, one of these days, Lord, one of these days, I'm going to see that post. Like, I'm going to see the words, you know, that she had some kind of experience and she's questioning things, you know, like I'm going to be ready to disciple her when because if he can get me, he can get her.
Yeah.
Anyways, I was living in my camper, or I actually moved into my parents' RV. They decided to move to Nevada. They gave me the RV. And that ended up being a whole mess in itself a few years later. But I had all these disclaimers on my Facebook not to PM me, no private messages. I'm not here to, even women. I still to this day, I'm very bad at holding. I think I have this fear of commitment. I don't want to commit to a conversation because I'm like, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to sit down and go back and forth with you for however long you want to go back and forth. So I'm kind of like, you know, we can chit chat on my comments here and there when I'm checking my comments and, you know, but I don't want to commit to it. So let me just fast track to Sean. So about 6 months before I met Sean, or before I officially met him, I started feeling God put it on my heart during my morning prayers to pray that he would make me into a proper wife. And okay. Now, by this time, I knew not to laugh anymore at the little still small voice telling me what to pray for. But I did think, I mean, I thought, why would you want me to pray that, Lord? I don't want to get married. I'm not looking for a man. I'm not asking you to bring me a husband, you know, but I'll pray that. I'll include it in my prayers. So I started, you know, saying, and make me into a proper wife with all these other requests I had from every morning.
Was
And it
that
was about 6.
right? Because you went from no way, I don't need this, forget it, I'll carry my own lawnmower to praying to be a proper wife.
I still had no desire. No, I still had no desire to be married. I was not seeking men. I still had my no PM policy on my Facebook, but I knew that God was telling me to pray that. So I'm like, look, I'll be obedient to you. I didn't know there was a reason, you know, I didn't know back then, but of course I know now because he was preparing me to soften me up to open the inbox when Sean messaged me because he had been now when I started sharing some of his stuff on Facebook, I'd like copy and paste his post into mine and then I'd tag him in it to credit him. At that time, he had a girlfriend. He had a girl in his pictures. I wasn't going to his pictures and like, oh, this guy's cute. No, I just really was attracted to his knowledge of scripture and not romance attracted. I was just like, wow, this guy really knows the book and he explains it in a way that really just makes it so easy to comprehend. So that's what I was drawn to. I was drawn to the scripture and the knowledge, but I had no thoughts in my mind of, you know, romantic anything because he had a girlfriend in all his pictures. So I was like, oh, you know, whatever. I didn't even have the thought of, oh, he's got a girlfriend because I wasn't looking for that. So he ended up going off of Facebook for a while to take a little break. And it turns out he was going through a breakup with this girl. He was engaged to marry her. And the Lord, it turned out, had been trying to show him for a while that she wasn't the one. She was actually cheating on him. And like he said that it got to a point where he had a dream where someone grabbed his face in the dream and pulled it to them and said, she's cheating on you. And then like that next day was when he finally was like, oh, there's been all these signs. Let me figure this out. And he found all the text messages and all that. So, but he was like, when he went on this little hiatus from Facebook, he said it felt so weird because he was having all these thoughts of me, this random girl on Facebook that someone had said to him Oh, have you met this? My last name was Kuhn at that time. Have you met this Lindsey Kuhn girl? She's like the dude version of you. Like she's so into the Bible like you are, and blah blah blah. And so we had this exchange on one of my posts where he came back to Facebook after his hiatus and after this breakup, and he said something on a post of mine. And I responded to him and I said, "You're like the dude version of me." And I had no idea that someone had said that to him. I had no clue. Okay. And he's like, "I may have thought something like that myself once or twice." And then some other guy comes onto the thread and is like, "Hey, stop beating around that bush and light it up." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And he's like insinuating that we're flirting. And I'm like, "Oh no, Sean's he's got a lady love, I'm not looking to, and then Sean came back and made a comment about dealing with a breakup. Still, I was not thinking, my mind was not in that place. So but I was open to him. I wasn't uncomfortable I thought, if he messaged me, I would respond, I wouldn't be uncomfortable with that because there were lots of guys who would message me and I'd just leave them on red, I'm not interested. So he ended up messaging me one day and asked me if I like riddles. Like, sure. Yeah. So he sends me this list of characters. Now, mind you, I'm new in the Torah crowd. I've been walking Torah for like 6 months. I don't know Hebrew. I don't know Paleo Hebrew. I don't even know there's a difference between Hebrew and Paleo Hebrew. But it turns out what he sent me was his phone number in Paleo Hebrew. And I didn't get it. So he ended up having to tell me, like, because I was like trying to look, I'm like, I don't know what these symbols mean. I'm like trying to find out I'm looking at the alphabet. I didn't know they also represent numbers. Like he's doing this like multi-layered code of his phone number for me when we're already talking on Facebook Messenger. I'm like, to this day, I don't text him on his phone. We use Messenger. But that was how he broke the ice. And I mean, we talked for a few days in Messenger and we FaceTimed. And that first FaceTime, I knew I was supposed to be his wife. It was so weird. It was like it was this knowing inside of me. It wasn't like, oh, I want to marry this man. It was like this, like I'm his rib, and like I'm meeting this part of my DNA that has been missing for it was a strange godly appointment. Now I understand now. But yeah, we did long distance for a little while and he ended up moving out to Colorado and that was all he wrote.
Amen. Well, no, I mean now the journey continues and you have a beautiful family together and wow. I don't know if the testimony ends at that. Maybe
No,
that's
I mean, there's a lot more that I've grown through marriage, I mean, that could be a fun show sometime
that would be a
maybe.
show, a very, very fun show another time.
Yeah. Because I didn't understand there is a whole purpose for marriage that God has with us. And if we lean into it and use it for the purpose he designed it for, and part of that is refining and letting that spouse be a mirror to you and just making that choice. Wow, do I want to change all these things I'm seeing in myself, or do I want to dig my heels in and this is just who I am, or do I want to use the opportunity to learn and grow and become a better person? And that's definitely what marriage has done for me. And having a child is something that's a big part of my testimony because my whole life never wanted kids, and of course, I struggled with the regret of the abortion that I had once I became a Christian and realized the weight of it. But even then, I still had this deep-seated programming of, children are a prison. They're a burden. And it was probably 3 years into being with Sean, being with a safe, secure, loving, gentle, strong man, that I started to feel safe enough that could be that's something I would like to experience with him. That's something I would like to do with him, and I'm safe to do it with him. And so and then it was a whole process of actually getting pregnant. That's a whole testimony of itself, of many years of trying and struggling with that. So Yeah, I mean, that was a whole nother level of feminist programming that the Lord had to work out of me even after I became a Christian. It took a long time.
And
So,
that's it. It's ongoing, right? It's ongoing refinement and sanctification.
absolutely.
I think I chose to get baptized 2 years ago, and I think I thought I was going to come out of the water a completely different person. And I mean, it changed a lot, but I wasn't a completely different person. It's ongoing every day. Stuff keeps coming up. And
Yeah.
you do have to, he's not a genie. And I think that's one of the things that I appreciate the most being on this particular path is knowing where, just the idea of repentance, like that we actually we have to put in some effort. It's a relationship. It's not just
Yeah.
sit back and let him do whatever we want him to do for us. We
Right.
have to show that we're invested in this too. So it's a daily if you record your testimony 5 years from now, you're gonna have all kinds of other stuff to add.
Yeah. And there may be things that I see then that I didn't see now. It's just an ongoing, it's a wonderful thing because he's also, he's not a tyrant. He's not going to force you to change. He might chastise you and he might let your life go to such crap and you're at such a rock bottom that you have nowhere else to look but up. But he's not going to force you into the good behavior. He's not going to force you into humbling yourself. Like you can fight him on it, and it's going to be a lot more unpleasant if you do. But yeah, I think that's probably one of the biggest things. One of the biggest realizations in the Torah walk was, oh, okay, the Sabbath and the food laws, that's the milk of the Torah walk.
And
meat, the meat of the Torah walk, man, is your heart and your attitude and how you speak to people and how you respond to blessing and cursing. That like Sabbath and dietary laws are easy.
the very beginning
Once,
of it, right? It's just a very
yeah,
beginning, especially
like
when you're vocal and when you're open to other people's thoughts publicly. It's
absolutely. Yeah. And social media has definitely created a different kind of environment and it opens up a lot more doors for sins of the heart and I don't think people realize that. I have gotten very I've gotten very strict over my Facebook page in terms of the kind of comments I allow to stay up and the things that I just remove because I don't want to sin in my heart against people. And there are some people that say things that I lash out in my heart in response to them because most of the time it has nothing to do with what I said in my post. They're like bringing up some or they're accusing me of not addressing some nuance that I should have addressed in that post because not everybody is blah 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 blah. Like there are so many times where I want to respond in a very sinful way to people. And for me, it's easier I'm just going to delete this comment. I'm going to
it's
remove
very
it
yeah.
from my line of sight. So I'm not thinking about, oh, I'm going to go, because when I leave something up like that I know I should just delete, I always end up going back and responding. And then I get into an argument, I get into a circular thing, so yeah, over time, I've realized that, man, social media is this whole world where people say that's not real life. It is. And God is holding you accountable for the things you say. And he's holding you accountable for the accusations you make and social media and online, the internet, YouTube, it's made it very easy to feel comfortable accusing people of things that, in the Torah could have got them stoned to death. And none of us, have any qualms about, oh,
Build
yeah, you're just an idolater.
yeah, entire ministries based on calling other people names. That's wild.
Yes. Yes. And I want to be clear that, everything has its place. I do believe that everybody's got a ministry that they're called to, if they're called into some form of ministry, and all of that looks different. And some people may be called into exposing the music industry. There's a ministry online from Pastor Joe Schimmel. I think I'm saying his last name right. Good Fight Ministries, and his stuff woke me up to the Gnosticism and rock music and movies. You know, it was a deep dive for me into, oh my gosh, all this pop culture stuff that I've been engulfed in. Wow, it's been teaching me Luciferianism. You know, I feel that stuff has its place, but when everything you're posting is about all the stuff that Christians are doing wrong, here's why you guys are bad, here's why we're good, here's why I'm getting in and you're not, you're a Trinitarian, you're not a Trinitarian, you're going to the fire, you know, you don't say his name right, you're going to the fire, you know, the way that the lack of love in the Torah community was definitely something that I wasn't expecting, and has been a huge part of my testimony in the Torah in terms of learning my own, gosh, how do I want to present myself to the world outside? How do I want people to feel when I speak to them on this platform? What do I want to use this platform for? Because a lot of people will go on that platform and talk about what a demonic, wicked thing it is, but then they're on it using it. So I'm like, okay, well, if we're going to be on it, let's use it for some ministry. Like, let's encourage people, let's plant seeds, let's educate people maybe on some things that they need to be educated on. But yeah, this, you know, the heart problems in the Torah community, honestly, you know, it's again, it's not unique to the Torah community. We're just bringing in heart problems from mainstream Christianity into Torah now, because we know that people in the churches have their own heart issues, and I know plenty of people have stories of how they were treated by mainstream Christians with no love, you know, so it's, the whole body is a mess. And at this point, that's why Yeshua has to come back and rule with a rod of iron and enforce unity. And there's been times where Sean and I, you know, we're talking about the history of the church, Catholicism and Orthodoxy, and you look at those first couple of centuries and the confusion that was coming out in those centuries, and the doctrines of demons that were coming out at that time trying to attack the faith, and how I'm like, oh, you know, I hate that Catholicism enforced unity, but I also understand that this body of people, we don't have unity unless it's enforced in some sort of way. So I'm not saying that Catholicism was the right kind of unity to enforce, but I understand why they had to come together at a point and say, all right, this is what we're doing. Everybody else who doesn't want to do it, get out. You know, I'm like, because that's what Jesus is going to have to do when he comes back. He's going to be like, all right, here's the law. This is what we're doing. Everybody who's not in, get out. You know, like literally.
I was Jess and I went camping the other day, and I arrived before him, and I set up the tent, and I was making the fire and preparing food, and I was just thinking how there's so many things I do in my life right now I'm just practicing for. Like, I
Right.
can't wait. Show us how to do it properly, please.
Yeah.
We can
Yeah.
think we know pronunciation. We can think we are certain of the calendar, of all of these things, but he's going to have to come back and tell us where we were wrong and why we shouldn't have ch chastised our sisters and brothers and told them they're burning because they follow a different calendar. That's he doesn't like that. That's straight from the enemy. I'm sure of it.
Yeah, there's a verse in Acts where Paul is informing people that the time of God overlooking your ignorance is over. So that right there is proof. There are times of ignorance that God looks over our errors, you know, our wrong thinking. He stayed loyal to, we forget that he stayed loyal to the covenant with Israel through so much apostasy with them. He gave them so many opportunities to turn back to him. And some of them went off and did some way worse things than you know, being in a Catholic church for most of your life. Like, some of these people went out doing actual idolatry and were able to repent and come back to him. So, you know, the longer I've been in the Torah walk, the more I want my mercy to grow for people. And the more I want to be meeting people where they're at, just like he met me where I was at in that RV in that night when I would have never picked up a Bible and never would have been open to that. And so I look at people in the churches and I'm like, this is not just something they were raised in their family with. This is generations of being taught unsound doctrine. Now, they're at least being taught Jesus. They're at least being taught he's the Messiah. He's the Savior. Yes, he's the high priest. They don't teach what that really means, but they are being taught the milk, the basics. And I'm not going to question anyone's faith. I'm not, unless they're showing clear fruit. Like if the fruit is clear, if they're out committing adultery and doing murders and stealing and lying, and, I might question that person's status in my mind, but I don't speak those things out loud. I leave that up to God. Because if anyone had seen me in the first 3 months of my Christian walk, I would have been on post being exposed. Look at this Lindsey girl reading a Gnostic Bible. Look at her. She's wicked. She's a wolf. Thank God I didn't have any kind of a public platform at that point, because in my innocence and in my infancy of the faith, I still had a lot to learn. And some people don't get out of that infancy. I would say that the only thing that's really changed in our generation, as opposed to all the generations before us, is that we do have much easier access to the word. So we have a lot less excuse for knowing it. Okay. But we also, I really believe that God created us with a certain need and desire for teaching. And that's why he put that system in place. He didn't expect every person in their tent in the wilderness to have a Bible and be reading it. It was only the priests who had, and they only had a few scrolls. They didn't have it. Even all the priests didn't have their own personal Bible. So people were expected to be able to go to a sound teacher and learn the Bible from him, because they didn't all have it. So even now, I feel like that's still a part of our DNA. That's part of what most people desire, to go and be taught somewhere. They don't necessarily have the drive and desire to open up the book themselves. They've also been intimidated for centuries to believe that even if they did want to read it on their own, they can't understand it. I mean, that's literally why the Catholic and Orthodox Church decided we're the ones who are going to decide how to interpret this, because they were just like the Pharisees. The laymen cannot understand these words. They have to filter it through us. So instead of just teaching the word, though, both the Pharisees and the later Christians, get into adding all this other stuff that they're doing aside. They've got the book, but then they're like, what Sean says, they bring all this other stuff in front of the book. Like, okay, well, yes, we believe this is the word of God. This is also inspired by God. Our oral tradition, it comes from God. Our liturgical tradition comes from God. So, but I look at that and I think, hey, I think there's going to be a lot of Catholics in the kingdom. I think there's going to be a lot of Pentecostals in the kingdom. I think there's going to be some Jehovah's Witnesses in the kingdom.
So nice to hear you say that, Lindsey. It's really nice to hear you say that. And at the end of the day, it's not even up to us. I am so glad that it's not other human beings that are going to be judging us. I would much rather be judged by the Father than judged by the human beings on the internet.
None of us would make it, including them. None of us would make it if it was up to us. I mean, thank God it's the Son who's going to judge us with all truth and righteousness and justice, because we suck at judging each other. That was the thing, when it really hit me when I read the verse about God is going to show us the same mercy that we show others. And he's going to judge us with the same judgment that we judge others. And so while that doesn't remove judgment, we don't go to the extreme that some Christians do, where they're like, don't judge, which means you can't even say something's a sin. But in terms of saying, because you believe this, you're not going to be in the kingdom.
And it gets said 35,000 times a day from what I see.
I mean, it's insane. And over all kinds of things that scripture doesn't say. If you believe this, you're not getting the kingdom. If you don't believe this, you're not getting in. Like, scripture is actually a lot more simple than we've been led to believe.
And again, you just said the church fathers, the Pharisees, and then the regular people on Facebook. We just want to add, and
yes,
we're not supposed to.
Yeah, Paul talked about his fear of his disciples moving away from the simplicity of Christ. And I think about that all the time, because now here's the thing. the internet is a blessing and a curse. The internet is amazing that we're able to all connect with each other like this when a lot of us don't have any kind of fellowship, any real fellowship in our immediate areas. But it also opens up the door for people to be swept away by every wind of doctrine, because you come into Christianity or you come out of the churches or whatever, and you get onto this online community where you're learning all this cool stuff about the Torah, and you're like, I don't want to watch this regular TV stuff anymore. I just want to watch things about the Bible. And so inevitably, you start watching all different kinds of teachers with all different kinds of teachings and all different kinds of understandings. And so if you're not careful, you get swept away into whatever video you're watching lately.
Algorithm takes you right down the rabbit hole, right? So
Yes.
your timeline could be very easily derailed in your first 2 months of trying to understand.
Oh, I have watched people study themselves right out of the faith.
Yeah.
Right out of the faith. Because here's the problem on the online Christian community, it's also mixed with this truther type community, and the truther type community becomes these people who you test everything, which means including the Bible, and not in a way of let me go find all the proof that proves the Bible is real. No, it's like, let me read all the things from all these atheists who don't believe in the Bible, who know nothing about it and its history and all the archaeology that proves that it's real. Let me go listen to all these people. Or people get sucked into the Judaism ditch on that side of the road, and they get into all the anti-Messiah, anti-missionary arguments, and end up, rejecting Christ completely and just going into Judaism. You have honestly, the one that's bothering me really bad right now is all these people who've been falling into the little C. You know where I'm going, don't you?
Well, that's exactly why I said your timeline gets all messed up.
The little season videos, and nobody gives me a nice scripture breakdown for that. They're like, here, watch this video. Here, I can't really articulate it, and I can't answer all your questions when you give me the scriptures about when the kingdom comes and all these time qualifiers. I can't really tell you when those actually happen. I have a guess. I'm not really sure, but here, watch this video.
It's just that particular thing is so juicy for people who do like to dig.
Yes.
It's so alluring, and I do have a very good friend who's in it, who is neglecting possible time of understanding the actual word, going down these things of trying to prove back to me why. Well, I'm like, but that's not what I read in the Bible. Like, where can and some of these things are valuable when they line up with scripture,
right.
And some of them are a waste of time, and they're taking us away, and we don't have much. I think we don't have time to waste. We need to understand what is happening in that book. We need to understand who is the Father, who is the Son. Stop wasting time basically on these rabbit trails that don't even lead anywhere.
Yeah, that's the thing. I've been in this community for going on 8 years now, and 9 or 10 years actually. And this topic only just now came up in the last 2-ish years, 3 maybe 3 years. But it's not something that people were, randomly talking about in corners here and there. It was something that was injected into YouTube. Some videos were put out, and that's when people started talking about it. So that's another thing that I'm like, hey, doesn't anybody realize that nobody had this theory until just recently? And there's been dispensationalism and preterism has been around for a long time. So there have been theories of the kingdom already being here. They just haven't gone all the way into this weird little season Tartaria thing. Now the Tartaria mud flood thing adds this whole other aspect of truther stuff to it. And that's where I'm like, this is a problem within the truther community, because this isn't just the Bible and the archaeology that supports the Bible. Now these people are rejecting, there's no such thing as archaeology. All that stuff is fake. Everything in the museums is all fake. They're just telling you that to make you think that the Middle East is actually, or that Israel is actually over there. It's actually in America. Like, there's all this weird stuff they go into. And I'm like, I don't know. I always regret starting to have conversations with them, because I feel like it devolves in this area where I am trying to I'm trying to have some kind of semblance of reality as I'm talking with them. And I can't appeal to anything with them. I can't appeal to history, because all of history is a lie. I can't appeal to archaeology. All of archaeology is a lie. And I'm a tin foiler. Like, I am a person that knows there are some things from history we've been lied about. Yes, absolutely. They've been hiding the giants this whole time. Okay. I know that. We all know what the Smithsonian's been doing with all those bones, But I am not at the point where I'm like, oh, all of it. I've been a student of history for a very long time. History has been one of my favorite subjects. And there is just so much from history that I'm like, well, this is just a real document from 400 years ago. Like, this is a real artifact from 500 years ago. Like, why are we all of a sudden deciding to say, well, that's not real? It's all fake, So I've struggled with that one the most, I think, because it really takes people out of any kind of reality. You can't meet them at kind of any middle point because they also don't have an actual breakdown of their timeline and when all this stuff supposedly happened. It's all kind of like some people think it happened 500 years ago. Some people think it was 1,000 years ago. Some people think it was 70 AD. Like there isn't even any coherence in the doctrine itself, in the timeline itself. So that one's another one that I've just been watching people, get swept away into. And I'm like, man, I've been studying the Bible with Sean from this perspective of the gospel of the kingdom, a literal physical kingdom that's literally coming down to earth. And we are going to be literally resurrected from Sheol and given real physical resurrected bodies with his law written directly on our hearts, and we're never going to break it again, and we're going to rule and reign with him for 1,000 years and teach the nations his law, and it's going to be wonderful. And I have been studying that one concept with Sean for going on 8 years now, and I have not lost any interest. I haven't lost any. I
And
haven't.
take up all of your time to just dig into
Yeah.
what's in the actual book. You don't need to
Yes.
go in all these other places. It's just taking away from the truth in the word.
Yes, I stopped watching I pretty much only watch Sean's teachings, and it's not because I'm some cult member. I am at a point where I don't get fed and find interest in the other forms of infotainment. That's what I call it. I don't think these things about, Tartaria and stuff like that. I don't see that as Bible teachings. I mean, this is infotainment. This is let's sit down and speculate, let's look at old timey pictures and speculate about how things ended up that way. Like I went through that phase when I first became a Christian, and I was listening to all kinds of stuff, you know. And I just now I'm like, if I'm gonna have something about the Bible on, I want to just be learning about the Bible. I don't want.
Maybe I don't know a lot of people who are on that train personally. The one person I do know is very new on this walk. So maybe it's one more thing that a person needs to get out of their system, just like, talking about not being a Torah terrorist, like what woman especially doesn't come into the understanding of Torah and not run like a bull through a china shop. Like we
Oh
all
yeah.
destroy the place with our passion. So maybe there's just a time lapse for the people who are on this train. Although I'm under the impression some people who, anyway, who knows, just maybe they got to get it out of their system and hit the end of it.
Yeah, I don't know. There are some people that have been very shocked who've been following our channel for the whole time we've had it. And I thought had a very good understanding of the timeline and when the kingdom comes and these time qualifiers. And I watched them teach other people those same things at times. And now they're all of a sudden,
It's in
you know,
direct opposition to the idea of New Jerusalem descending.
yeah.
It's
Oh,
completely in opposition to what Sean is teaching.
oh, I mean, the kingdom is going to come and stay. The kingdom is not going anywhere. And the verses about the kingdom coming are clear. Daniel says clearly this kingdom is never going to go away. It's never going to disappear and float up into the sky and be invisible for a time while everybody's left on earth to just turn to chaos and let Satan's kingdom come to rule again. And like I
Or
just
maybe it's something along the lines of the comfort that people have with pre-tribulation rapture. Like maybe if you believe, and I don't know exactly what the belief is, but maybe if you believe it's already happened, then you don't have to fear tribulation. Because
that
it's
could
already been
be.
there,
That could be
so that's
it could,
comforting because
yeah.
those of us who know that the kingdom's coming and that we're not being magically raptured away before tribulation, we know we're going to endure some crazy stuff if we're here, which
Mhm.
looks like it's probably happening.
Possibly.
But maybe it's just maybe it's just one other story that people can tell themselves so that they're not scared of having their head chopped off. I don't know.
I think that could have something to do with it for some people. I think some people really just get into this rut in the truther mindset of I've just always got to be questioning everything and I've always got to. I used to watch this when I first became Torah observant. I got into MTOI and Steve Berkson. Rabbi Bergson, and he always talked about new doctrinal understanding crack. And it was funny and there was some levity to it, but he was right in the sense that people get addicted to a new understanding of something, we figured this out. And I've been there. Like for a long time, I wanted to be the one on Facebook who was posting first about the false flag or, the hoax, something or other. I wanted to be the one breaking down the symbols from this music video to show people I had the gift of discernment. And I wanted to be the first one saying that, I wanted to be the first one posting it. And I think that is an issue for a lot of us in this crowd, especially. And we get addicted to learning something new that seems to put all kinds of puzzle pieces together, and it's mind blowing. And you just want to go and tell everybody. And I think that's what a lot of people get addicted to, that they get bored with the simplicity.
The meme with the guy who's standing there with a cigarette and he's got all the connections happening in the back.
Yes.
That's what a lot of us are like, and that's
and I think some of us really struggle with taking pride in that and thinking that we're showing something, that we have some kind of gift of discernment when we're always on a new conspiracy. I stopped a long time ago. I stopped being the person that, whatever news story is coming out and people are outraged about, I stopped sharing. I'm like, I'm going to give this a few days to see what the real story is. See what the real, and if it's something important enough to talk about, I will. If it's not, if it's just another thing that's being, injected into the hive mind to, control the outrage machine. I don't think people realize that their attention is currency, and the global elite will harvest your attention in any way that they can. And if they can get your attention on all this wicked, evil stuff, whether it's true or not, that's a win for them, And every time I try to talk about this on Facebook, I always inevitably get the few people who are like, but it's really important for us to understand the devil's machinations. It's important for people to understand that. So they need to take time. And I don't necessarily disagree, but it's got its place. And I really think the percentage of how much you're learning about the kingdom of darkness as opposed to how much you're learning about the kingdom of God, it should be like this. Everything you're watching shouldn't be focused on Satan's kingdom and exposing the lies and exposing Satan and exposing the music industry and all that stuff. I feel like you can learn that the music industry is a satanic Babylonian death cult in a couple of episodes of something and be done with it and move on to the next topic. But I try to encourage people that, people start living in fear because they're so focused on Satan's kingdom, and it's God's kingdom that's coming, that's going to crush that kingdom, and it's never going to go away. And we're never going to have to worry about all the stupid stuff we worry about in this life. We're not going to worry about it in the kingdom. And Jesus tells us, seek first his kingdom, not Satan's kingdom and his machinations and how he does things. And there's a reason for that, because it brings joy and peace in the midst of Satan's kingdom when everything feels like it's crumbling, but I'll tell you what, you'll start to notice over the years, the news cycle and how that affects the Christian community and what they're talking about in terms of end times and him returning, because this is like the third or fourth Israel.
What my husband just told me today, because I am new here. I didn't know anything about raptures and stuff before 2 years ago. And it's literally, Lindsey, what he just told me. He's like, this is the fourth time. So calm down.
Yeah.
I said, but what if we never see each other again? He's like, Jenny, Facebook is lying to you. I will see you in 2 weeks.
Yeah, because that's another huge lie that has been created in modern Christianity. Actually, I think a lot of people don't realize that the Catholics and Orthodox never had this Zionist thing. They had their opinions of the Jews and Judaism, and there was always a line there that wasn't crossed. And so the modern state of Israel it didn't exist until the 1900s, but it was never a timepiece for anyone throughout the history of Christianity. No one ever looked at that area and said, oh, some Jews are back. Time's a ticking, clock has started. So that using modern Zionist Israel as a timepiece is very new in Christianity, and it's still only in certain denominations of Christianity. There are still plenty of Christians who aren't Zionists, but Zionist Christianity has really infiltrated. And now it's like this sin to have a controversial opinion on Israel and Zionism, when it's like, but I'm telling you, in 2020, or it was 2019, it was when Trump first got in office. Back then, there was a peace treaty and a 7-year agreement, and that back then was a whole. My dad was calling me, "Hey, what do you guys think about this peace treaty? You think Jesus is coming back soon? You think we got 7 years?" Like, even the 7-year thing turns out it's incorrect. So yeah, the news cycles are something that is used also to perpetuate this distraction, confusion, fear, be afraid, because even people who are saying they want Jesus to return, they then get all scared when stuff starts happening in Israel. And I'm like, first of all, stuff is always happening in Israel. That place has been created to be a place of destabilization and chaos and an excuse to do things politically over there. There's always something going on. It's just when they choose to put it in the news and tell you, oh, now war is coming. Wars and rumors of wars, guys. Like, just focus on his kingdom, man. And that's what I've been doing for the last 8 years. And I don't need to get on into all these rabbit holes, into all these other winds of doctrine, because I've come to understand the basics, and I have a firm foundation in that. And I'm confident in my understanding in those basics, and understanding those basics helps when I branch out into all this other great, because there's all kinds of rabbit holes in the book itself. Go read the prophets. Guys, there is so much cool history and information in the prophets that just gets kind of glazed over because people are either hyper focused on the Torah or they're hyper focused on the New Testament. And man, the forgotten books in the middle, there's so much in there to keep you busy for your whole life.
To read anything other than the Bible. There's so much in there, and I don't even have enough hours a day to read all the pages. So why would I start picking up other things and watching other. I mean, I did it in the beginning, but
I think I do think it's something that I'm not trying to demonize it. Like, for anyone watching who may think I'm demonizing you watching these infotainment type things, I'm not. Like I said, I had my phase. I got that out of my system. I went through all that. But the whole goal, guys, is to find stability in your understanding and have a firm foundation that your understanding is built on. And once you have that foundation, you don't need to go out and curiously seek all these other, honestly dangerous ideas that
it shakes any possible foundation that is there, that people don't even end up committing or walking on this path because they're still trying to check out if this is legit or not,
Yeah.
or they're
Yeah.
questioning Paul, and Paul was a false prophet, and then the whole it is in the
oh yeah, that's a whole nother snare in the Torah crowd.
That comes up a lot, dude. There are I have noticed the phases just in this community and the people that I know that cycle in and out of, like, some days it's like 5 to 10 videos are being put out about the same subject. I'm like, where did we get the memo that that's what everybody was recording today?
Yeah, and there really is a hive mind, and there really are agents of chaos who are tasked with just injecting things into the hive mind. So clearly I'm still a conspiracy person, but I think that a lot of stuff is getting injected deliberately into the truther crowd and into the Christian crowd, specifically to keep people fighting, anything to keep people from coming to learn the promise of the kingdom and the resurrection and the obedience that everyone needs to have in order to see the Lord, the holiness without which no one will see the Lord. So, if we just spent half the time that we spend in all these rabbit holes with all these theories about things that we can't prove one way or another, if we spent just that time just reading the scriptures and learning the basics and just learning that there's a literal kingdom above your head, it's been built for you from the beginning of time, and God just wants you to be the type of person that he wants to spend eternity with. So let's work on becoming those kind of people. And yes, that includes what we eat and how we dress and what days we observe. And it also includes how we treat all the people who eat differently than us and dress differently than us and observe different days. and how we love everybody. And so, yeah, man, I used to see a lot of posts. I would see posts like this occasionally when I was new to the Torah with some people who were a little more mature in their walk. And man, it would trigger me. And I'd feel like, oh, no, we need to warn people. We're watchmen on the wall, I'm
I know
Ezekiel.
exactly what
Your
you're
blood is on my hands. I'm like, not realizing that, okay, that verse has context. And yes, it can be a principle that you can apply, but that command was not for you, Lindsey. That command was to Ezekiel. You are not Ezekiel on the walls of Jerusalem calling a repentant Israel back into covenant. You are Joe Schmo on Facebook, scattered into wherever USA, planting seeds, in the hive mind, And so I've definitely learned over time that there's an approach. I do wish I had known more about the approach when I first became a Christian, because I wonder if I could have salvaged my relationship with Katie. I don't know that I would have, because I never tried to tell her anything about the Bible. I never tried to preach Christ to her. I didn't know how. I didn't want to offend her. I didn't want to scare her away. I knew my own repulsion to Christ in the Bible when I was a New Ager. And I knew that me coming to understand that everything she believed basically was a lie, that would just be so offensive to her. So I didn't bring any of that up. I just kind of kept to myself and posted Bible verses on Facebook. And in the beginning, I didn't even call out New Age stuff, but I do wonder if I had had a more mature approach to my own walk, if I would have been able to maybe communicate with her differently somehow. But I don't know. She kind of just
You'll
stopped
never
talking to me.
You'll never know, and I think that so much of it is inevitable. When I went from New Age to Jesus, I lost I don't know how many people, and then from Jesus on this path, I lost even more people. I got kicked out of
Yeah.
church. It was just everything fell apart, and I wasn't even publicly talking on Facebook about any of this. I just had a few friends I was trying to suss things out with. They were getting real agitated. It was the messianic friends that I had were siding with the evangelical Christians. They would meet somewhere so that it could come up against my whole one law thing.
Yeah.
And I think it was all inevitable. And he took everyone out of my life overnight, just at the time that I got married to Jesse. And then I was free. I didn't
Yeah.
have to I didn't have to censor what I thought or felt because I was going to go into the church on Sunday and I didn't want people to have their feelings hurt. Now I just had a clean slate. So I guess just to say with your friend, I have a feeling that it was inevitable and you could have been as gentle as you wanted and she'll hear
Well,
it.
it was. I posted about this a couple weeks ago where I went back into our last conversation that we had together when she had deleted me. When I noticed she had deleted me from Facebook, and I texted her to ask why. Like, we've been friends for 15 years, girl. You are my only friend from high school left. Like, what, and you can't even be friends with me on Facebook now. And she told me that Spirit told her to remove me from her life. So I'm kind of like,
You and your doctor.
yeah, it was inevitable, because she she was being called by them into a path of becoming a priestess, of what religion, who knows. I mean, now that I reading the scriptures and understanding that ancient pagan religions had priests and priestesses that served an actual god, that did work in an actual temple, that did actual sacrifices to that god. Like, these new agers these days, they use these words and they think they're reclaiming something from ancient times. And I'm like, until you guys are, throwing babies into the fire with Moloch and having orgies in front of it, you're not reclaiming anything. This is new age. This is a new religion. Because I used to hate, and Katie hates, when people call it new age. They're like, this isn't new. We're old. We're doing the ancient paths. And it's like, no, you're cosplaying ancient pagans, and you're not even doing it right, because you don't even know how depraved ancient pagan religions truly were. Like, you don't truly understand the depths of just how wicked it is, really. All these modern new agers would be appalled at these sacrifices and the rituals that they would do. Like, they'd be appalled at it. But so she was being called to be a priestess of something, and Me being someone who could possibly plant seeds of truth in her life was not convenient for the spirits that she's working with. So
But he
yeah.
pulled you out of it, and he pulled me out of it, and he pulled all kinds of people out of it, and it might just be a matter of time for Katie.
I every day I pray for her every day. I've asked myself, like, am I obsessed with her? I'm not in love with her, I'm whatever LGBT part of me used to exist is definitely not there anymore. But I definitely think about her every day. But she was my best friend. And the thing is that she was kind of like my sensei for many years. She was the emotionally and spiritually mature person in our relationship. And she was the one who would guide me through really hard times and be that support system that I just didn't have with anyone, even my mom. And so I think there's just this part of me that I just want to share this with her. I just want her to know this peace, this love that I've come to know. And I want to give back to her and disciple her now, like that's how I feel about it now, where I'm like, oh, I want her to come to me as a new babe and have her ask me, how do I do this? So I think that's, I think because I love her so much for what a good friend she was to me for all those years. I don't look at her and think, oh, that bee, no, I'm like, I love her so much. She was such a good friend to me. She really, because when I moved to Colorado and I got a boyfriend when I moved here and we became high school sweethearts and we had a real core group of people that were all friends with him. So when he and I broke up, all those friends went with him. They were like, who's Lindsey? Yeah, we've known her for 3 years, but oh, she's not with Alex anymore. Or she's not our friend. And Katie was one of the only people who that she didn't have any loyalty with that. Like she was my friend and I didn't lose her through that. So I think it's probably reaches into some abandonment issues I have in me and all this kind of stuff that I need to work through. But I do pray for her every day. And I do believe God can get her. He's just he's got to send an angel in there to kick some demons out of her life because she's being tricked right now, like I was, into manifesting all kinds of things in her life, and her life is wonderful right now, like physically, materially. She kind of she doesn't live anywhere. She travels. She is in Mexico and Ghana, and she's working for herself doing these I would call it spiritual coach, but she hates the word coach. She's an oracle, and she's an aura alchemist is what she calls herself, and she works with women. They pay her good money to. This is the crazy thing. You come into Christianity and you see how little people are willing to put into their spiritual walk. And I'm not just talking about money. I mean, just effort. But you look at New Agers and they are so devoted to their walk, and they will pay thousands of dollars to have someone disciple them in nonsense. I mean, the stuff that these people type up that's supposed to be encouraging, I'm like reading it, trying to decode, like, this, I know this is English that I'm reading, but it's not translating.
Yeah, I see some of my 5 year ago posts from Instagram.
Oh yeah.
And I have no idea what this even means. I wrote it.
Yes.
Good at writing. I don't know what it says.
Same. I have messages that I channeled that I'll read and be like, this is gobbledygook. And when at the time I shared it, and people were like, oh, this is so profound. And this just unlocked something in my psyche. And oh, thank you. And I'm reading it now. I'm like, this is nonsense.
Meanwhile, those naive, stupid Christians over there are reading the Bible like a bunch of dum-dums. Right?
Yes, exactly. But but she makes a really good living just mentoring women in new age, new thought type stuff. So it's pretty crazy to see, all these other religions in the world will devote so much of their time and energy and money into their spiritual path. And man, Christians are one and done. I said my prayer, I'm saved, or they get into, some kind of ritual. And a lot of people who need that structure, they get drawn into the Catholic or the Orthodox Church because there's some kind of structure there. There's some kind of ritual there for them. But yeah, it's interesting to see how devoted New Agers are to their spirituality compared to Christians.
Oh, I told you we could talk for 3 hours and we did.
I know we've gone way we've gone it just flew by, honestly.
I'm so happy to have spoken to you, and I think there's a few other subjects we could try to chat about sometime soon. I hope was
Yeah,
absolutely.
let me know.
I didn't have any expectations or anything like that, but if I did, you as a human being, I'm really, really happy that I could get to know you as a person a little bit better.
Well, I appreciate you asking me on, and it's been a long, like I said, it's been a long time since I shared my testimony, so it was good to walk through it again. And anyone watching, please put Katie on your prayer list. Put her on your prayer list, please. I just want just an army of people praying for her, because I know there's no one else in her life who is, and that'll be a big win for the kingdom if we can get Katie. So please pray for her.
That's great. Thank you so much, Lindsay. Have a great rest of your evening, and
You too.
talk to you soon.
Bye.